Welcome to Licensed Poetics, a podcast about books and art. I'm your host, Li, and welcome to a very different episode of Licensed Poetics today. It's going to be a very collaborative episode. I have been traveling a little bit, and I've taken my microphones with me to do some out-of-studio recordings. So in this episode, you will hear from Cady, an LP alumnus, and I recorded her segment in her apartment in Shanghai. So you will hear her reading updates first, and then you will hear a bunch of friends with whom I recorded in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. So the story is Marlene, another LP alumnus, kindly organized a writer's retreat for myself and a bunch of friends. And you're going to hear from them today, what they've been reading, what their interests are, etc. Today's LP friends in order of appearance are Cady, Marlene, Eezu, Maja, Derek, and Abby. A fun fact, out of these 6 people, 5 of them have worked for or is currently working for or will likely work for the 3 big consulting firms. So that's just an interesting fact about LP friends. If you follow Licensed Poetics Buy Me a Coffee page, you will have heard all about my China trip. On my China trip, I met 2 authors that I really admire. So I'm so lucky, and it was such an amazing experience, which I talk about in my live update audio message. The audio message is free for the public, but starting from next month, it's going to be available to members only. So please consider supporting Licensed Poetics on Buy Me a Coffee. You can do a one-time contribution or become a member. That's up to you. And either way, thank you so much. One last thing before we get into Cady's reading updates. I do apologize for the bad audio quality of this episode. So what happened was I have 2 microphones, and one of them, the one I'm using right now, is a good one, and the other one is less reliable. So for most of this episode, you will hear a primary speaker, the person that's doing the reading update, and they will be holding this microphone. And the other person, usually me, when I'm supplying secondary commentary, the audio quality is going to be not as good. But the secondary audio is usually brief, and I hope you can bear with me for this episode. Okay, now let's hear from Cady. I have the lovely Cady here sitting next to me.
In Shanghai.
Yeah, that's right. We're recording in Cady's very special apartment in Shanghai. Some of you might remember Cady. She is a recurring guest on LP. Last time I recorded with you was the 2023 Reading Wrapped episode. And you might remember in that episode, at the end, Cady said she's moving to China, and she has done just that.
Here I am.
How do you find Shanghai?
I love it here because I actually just posted on my Chinese social media saying that I'm still in like the infatuation phase with Shanghai just because I'm like 3.5 months in. But it's very leafy, it's very central, and like Shanghai has just it transitioned from winter to spring to summer like during the time I was here. So I literally saw all life just bloom.
Oh,
so
that's beautiful. And I love that nature is like the thing that you notice. I think that's a very good thing. Like that's the opposite of what I would notice. I'll just say that. But yeah, I'm here visiting Cady in her lovely apartment, and it is a gorgeous apartment. Can I say it's been very well designed. Yeah. So we don't have much time today because Cady has to go. So let's first talk about the English bookshop that we went to yesterday.
Okay, it's called Deja Vu. It sells secondhand books and clothes. And the whole shop is kind of cat themed because there are a lot of cats that go into the shop. Mm-hmm. And a lot of strays. I didn't see it yesterday, but last time I went, there were like 5 of them. Anyways, it's very, very popular. It's located in near the Wukang Road, which is kind of the most internet famous street in Shanghai right now. Like all the trendiest stores and like fashions and like culture and everything. If you walk along there, it's basically all youth dressed very diversely. That's like the cultural epicenter of Gen Z Shanghai.
And they have a selection of secondhand English books.
Yep. Very reasonably priced.
And the thing is, in that shop, you pick up a book and then you use your phone, your WeChat app to scan the QR code on
And
the
check the
back.
price.
Yeah, and that's how you know the price. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
You wouldn't find that in Australia.
Well, everything is highly digital in China, so I'm not surprised. It's very sophisticated. They also have an app as well. Anyways, yeah, lovely book. You walk in there and then you hear a lot of people speaking English, even Chinese-looking people.
Yeah, there was a Malaysian girl, I'm pretty sure. I could tell from her accent.
I could tell like there were like 2 American-born Chinese guys as well. Yeah. I mean, the last time I was there, I was also with my Canadian Chinese friend. It's just such a expat kind of safe haven.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it.
That's definitely. Could you tell us your reading updates as well?
Oh, okay. I have several. So the most recent book I finished, I love it so much.
Mhm.
It's The Worlds I See by Fei-Fei Li. So the long subtitle is Curiosity, Exploration, and Discovery at the Dawn of AI.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was published last year, and Fei-Fei Li is probably one of the very few people, like half a dozen of people, who dramatically progressed AI that made AI what it is today. And being a female scientist, let alone like an Asian female who did that in this highly white male dominated field, is just such an extraordinary achievement. And she is like 40 something years old. Is insane. So I enjoyed reading this book so much just because it was such a different voice from what we are used to hearing, like who talk about AI.
Oh yeah, I imagine it would be really different to Elon Musk.
Well, Elon Musk, okay, I guess he's kind of.
And what's the guy, the CEO of OpenAI?
Yeah, Sam Altman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like no, no disrespect to them, but,
Okay.
but so she in this book she used 2 parallel like lines. Like one line is basically her personal journey of growing up in China and then moving to America when she was a teenager, which highly, highly resonates with my own. Like all of the things she talks about in there, you know, like transitioning from Chinese middle class to American poverty and like working in a restaurant. I'm like, oh my God.
You're like, I'm ready for my life.
I know. And like she having like a special bond with her math teacher. I'm like, yes. And so that's like one line. And the other line was actually about her research, which is quite in depth, from her basically like developing the ideas of like what consciousness could be, how we learn through seeing like humans or organisms.
Visually.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah, visual data was probably one of the milestones in the development of intelligence and consciousness. The more information we receive, the more kind of it's like floating in our brain, and like the more this kind of neural network starts building. And neural network is the basis of AI today. And she talks about how that kind of idea progresses into like the evolution of AI technology. Like there was definitely an AI winter when she was starting to work on it, but she was a major force in lifting this field of research out of this winter into what it is today, through the work that she's done. I won't spoil it anymore. I highly recommend this. But I also just love it so much because it's basically telling it's like what I wish my life. Well, not she is basically a role model for me. Like if in 20 years time I am like her in a specific field, that's the dream, right?
Oh, that's so cute. So is it like a nonfiction memoir?
Yeah, it is an autobiography. And she writes beautifully.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah, she is very, very articulate, both about the technology itself and also about her own life. Yeah, and it's like some of the things she described are like uncannily familiar. Aww. She also talked about like, you know, being an immigrant, like when she was deciding what to study, like how science just didn't seem like a safe or like an available option because, you know, like you want to do like law, medicine, all these kind of professions that guarantee financial security. But for her, like her family is extremely supportive of her, and they always knew that she wanted to become a scientist, and so it was like a no-brainer for her in terms of making that decision. And in another time junction, she had to make a similar decision. It was between staying in research and going into McKinsey. I know.
That is too hauntingly familiar. Okay.
I know, right? So
Did you ever consider research for yourself?
Well, yeah, I was planning to go to Harvard and study neuroscience. No, but that wasn't between McKinsey. I was leaving McKinsey to do that, but I didn't go because of COVID. And this book has made me want to go back into research. So I might actually consider going back to study.
Thanks to this book.
Yeah, I know.
Books do change lives.
Yeah, anyways. Highly recommend this. Like, she is a force of nature. So...
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Any other books that you've been...
Oh, okay. Several. Gotta jump a little bit like far and talk about another person who is kind of prominent in Silicon Valley, but whose book is the opposite rating. So that one I rated 5 stars.
I know which one you're going to talk about.
So it's the Almanack of Naval, Ravikant. You can tell from the subtitle of the book, A Guide to Wealth and Happiness, that it's not something that I would normally read, but I was kind of forced to read it because I was going on a live stream in China. We can go into that a little bit later. Like, so live streaming is a very, very popular form of media in China. It's not the kind of like game live stream that you see in the Western world. It's basically... like, sometimes it can be like a podcast, but but like filmed.
Yeah, it's like a live podcast.
Yeah, like that kind of live streaming. But most live streaming is done to sell products, honestly.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
right.
people talk about products and then like talk about their own lifestyles, etc. And then they bring out this product and like, hey, like you can click on this link and you get a 20% members discount, etc., etc. It's a very, very, I guess, defining type of media in the past 3 years of China. So, yeah, one of the questions the host of the live stream was going to ask me was, hey, like, assuming that you've read this book, which I haven't, one of the ideas is to, productize yourself. Like, I want to, understand, like, your kind of opinion on that. So, it's not a book. I don't know why it's a book. It's just a collection of quotes.
Yeah, that's what Yurizi said. He said,
sorry.
I know, right? He said it's a collection of tweets.
Yeah, quotes and tweets or interview
of Naval Ravikant.
Yeah. Like, I think some of the ideas he mentioned are a little bit interesting. Like, basically one like, you can think of yourself as a product and like think about like your unique value proposition, etc., etc. I think that's like a worthy idea to explore, especially if you're in the tech world or like if you're a freelancer. But that is literally like one sentence. I just need to read one sentence. I don't need to read
convincing in any way. How am I just convinced by that?
Or he goes a little bit more into depth. But still, like, like the host of the live stream I was going to, like, she actually did like a few, like 4 pages or 4 PowerPoint slides of summary on the book, and that was way better than the book itself. Anyways, my recommendation of this is to not bother reading it. Maybe if you see it in a workshop, in a bookstore, in a bookstore, like flip through it.
Yeah.
Like absorb a few lines, think about it. Like, some of it makes sense. Some of it is, like, a little bit, like, obvious.
And just leave it there.
Yeah.
Don't buy it.
Yeah, like, if
read through it the way you would scroll through someone's tweets. How about that?
Exactly. Like, don't print out someone's tweets and like store it in your home. It just doesn't make sense, right? And if you have spare cash, actually no, this book is available for free as a PDF online. So yeah, you don't even need to buy it. But if you have some spare cash, donate it to charity or buy from like a female author. Anyways, that's the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of my recent reading.
That's so funny.
Experience. And then I've got another one, Siddhartha. I was gifted this book by Reynolds,
Shout out to Reynolds.
Shout out to Reynolds. Whoever is friends with Reynolds.
Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Yeah, Hermann Hesse. I don't know how to say it. It's a German name. But this book, I think it's relatively famous in the Western world, especially back in the 60s. I think it was part of the countercultural movement. But geez, like it's very, very, very famous and popular in China. I didn't realize this, but like when I tell my Chinese friends, oh, I'm reading Siddhartha. Oh yeah, I've read this and blah, 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 blah. And it's like part of the top 250 books on Douban, which is like the Chinese, yeah, exactly. I think I really like this book. I think I'd give it like a 4.5. It's very beautifully written. It reads almost like poetry in some parts, and there are some paragraphs that are very, very profound. I think it's been very influential to me in terms of some of the ideas.
Yeah. So Siddhartha, that's the name of the Buddha, right?
I think it's borrowing the name of the Buddha, but this is not actually talking about.
So it's not a Buddhist religious.
It's talking about the son of a wealthy Brahmin who sets off on a quest of self-discovery. So it just goes through his life from youth to, like middle age. So,
to middle age, yeah.
To middle age, to his older years, and how like he goes through several stages of self-understanding and revelation, and you build these kind of revelations along with him. It's a very like you definitely empathize, not just empathize, but you feel like you are embodying Siddhartha is embodying yourself, like
your
when you're
growth,
when you're reading this book. And I love how like like Siddhartha goes like he learns through being an ascetic, basically just being like a wandering kind of like spiritual seeker who basically kind of like not really like a monk, but like they don't eat, they don't like, they basically just meditate, like they live off the forest. So that like they call it the samana in this book. So this is his first stage. Should I spoil it?
Maybe not, but like the setup really reminds me of the origin story of the Buddha.
Yeah, I think it's meant to serve as a parallel. And he does talk about Buddha is one of the characters in the book as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but like I love how the ultimate learning that he gets comes from the river, just by observing the river and listening to the river, living alongside it, and like learning how to listen by listening to the river. I just think that is
beautiful.
It's very beautiful. Yeah. Like because he meets the holy man, the Buddha, and he's like, okay, this plan is perfect. But one of the best things I learned and absorbed from this book was the idea that you cannot learn wisdom from someone else. You can only learn knowledge, but for wisdom, you have to attain it by yourself. You can listen to someone talking about wisdom. You can see kind of, okay, that's the end I need to reach. But you can't just, because by listening to it, you skip straight to the end. Like, you have to go through all of the processes yourself.
Because you have to learn wisdom. Right?
Yeah.
Like, yourself.
Yeah, not study it, but like learn it through experience and self-understanding.
Yeah.
And like he sees Buddha as this holy man who has attained this perfect wisdom. But then later on, he meets this ferryman who lives by the river, who he also sees as a perfect holy man just because he has listened to the river his whole life.
A ferryman. Yeah. Ferry or furry?
Like ferry, like ferrying across the river. Not a ferry, but like a ferry.
No, I was picturing furry, like a furry cat.
Your mind is going somewhere else. I don't think furries existed back in the 60s.
No, ferryman, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have to go. So I have to catch a plane now. But yeah.
Thank you so much for appearing. This is a very surprise appearance from one of my favorite recurring guests.
Well, I mean, I'm only recurring because I'm on this episode.
Yeah.
Also, guys, buy Fangling a coffee.
Yes, please do. Thank you so much for the plug. Cady very generously bought me 7 chai lattes, not coffees, chai lattes on my Buy Me a Coffee. True. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up in the future.
Cool.
Bye, Cady.
Bye.
That concludes the special segment with Cady. I'm really glad I got to record that little bit because, as you can hear, Cady had to leave early that day. But I'm really glad we have a record of our conversation. And I found her reading update very, very entertaining, especially what she said about that book, the Almanack book. I love that she said it's not even a book. It's basically a collection of tweets. That was really funny. Next up, let's hear from the friends on the writer's retreat, starting with Marlene. Hi, everyone. We're recording a special episode of Licensed Poetics. It's special because we're in a different location than usual. And I have here with me the recurring guest, Marlene.
Hello.
Hey, Marlene. So where are we?
We're at a writer's retreat in Woodford, which is near the Blue Mountains.
Woo-hoo.
And we've got this cute little Zen meditation house.
It's a gorgeous house.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much to Marlene for booking this wonderful location. Who do we have in the room with us?
We have, I think it's 5 other people with us today, including me. So me, Abby, Eezu, Maja, and Ahim as well. So there's a very diverse set of tastes in terms of writing and reading. Like, for example, Eezu is really into theater, so we've been talking about that as well. And some more interest in poetry as well. So it's awesome.
Yeah, that's right. And our listeners will be familiar with some of the voices already, Marlene being a recurring guest and Ahim being a previous host of this podcast. Okay, so what we're going to do in this special episode is we're just going to go around and talk about what we've been reading recently, a usual reading update, but with a lot more participants this time. So starting with me, I'm going to talk about this poetry collection that I picked up in China. It's a collection by Louise Gluck called Winter Recipes from the Collective. It's a collection that's published in one of the last years of her life, I believe. She's had quite a long life. She's an American poet. And as you can imagine, a lot of the poems are about death. And I really enjoyed it. And it's a bilingual copy that's sold in China. It's got English, the original, on one side and Chinese on the other. And one thing that I didn't know about Louise Gluck is that she actually had a lifelong interest in China. So she's a Sinophile, and she references Chinese literature and culture in a lot of her poems. And so one of my favorite poems from this collection is called The Denial of Death. And it's a really wonderful narrative poem where the speaker, the protagonist, says, I left my passport at an inn we stayed at for a night or so, whose name I couldn't remember. And because I left my passport there, the next hotel will not receive me. And I kind of have to watch my companion leave me. And then I would have to go along on the journey on my own. And in this poem, she talks about life and time, not in a linear way, but she experiences it like circularly, like a clock. And that's like a really beautiful way to think of time. And it is, in the end, a denial of death, so that life is not a linear journey moving from life to death, but it's rather you're moving in a circle where things and people move closer and further away from you all the time. And it's just a really beautiful and easy to read poem. And yeah, I really loved it.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I'm having a great reading year, actually.
Oh.
Yeah, much better than last year.
Why is that? What do you call a great reading year?
Because I feel like last year I read many books that I thought were like okay, but I feel like this year I've read some really good books.
Do you feel like you've gotten better at curating them?
No, I think I was a good curator last year as well. I just wasn't very lucky last year. Yeah, I've been really lucky this year. All right, that's it from me. Who would like to go next? Marlene?
I want to talk about this essay collection that I actually recently discovered just on Substack. But I learned it's by quite a renowned critic, Becca Rothfeld, and I think she's quite young as well. So she's a bit of a darling of the literary criticism scene. Yeah, and this book is really interesting. I think it's kind of really cool because it responds to the whole zeitgeist of like mindfulness and meditation and general minimalism. And it's called All Things Are Too Small, which I feel like on its own, it's already a really great title. But I'll just read a couple of the first sentences from it.
So when all things are small. Do you remember?
No, it's not
about the same thing.
No, it's not when all things. What was it called? It was like when big things were small.
No. We're talking about terrible titles that I can name my novel, and I was like, surely the worst title will be When Big Things Were Small. Wait, so what's it called actually?
All Things Are Too Small by Becca Rothfeld. So it's a collection of essays. I love essay collections. It prefaces with this quote from Hadewich of Brabant, who I think is a Dutch poet. All things are too small to hold me. I am so vast in the infinite. I reach for the uncreated. I have touched it. It undoes me. Wider than wide, everything else is too narrow. You know this well, you who are also there. So that's the preface quote. And Becca Rothfeld explains a little bit more. She says, all things are too small, not just to hold me, but to hold anything. Cups are too small, which is why they demand such relentless refilling. Bodies are too small to encompass more than a sole inhabitant, except in rare cases of mysticism or possession, or the more familiar but perhaps no less astounding case of pregnancy. Books can be big, most of the best ones are, yet even the most encyclopedic affairs are too small to encompass the whole of the world's wild machinery. I feel like that's a really, like, just such a strong start. So the thing that really stands out to me about this essay collection is just how, like, luscious the prose is. It's so delicious to read.
It really is luscious, I think.
Yeah, and I think it really kind of propels forward the kind of main sentiment that she's trying to express. So the whole thing is basically an indictment of minimalism and it as a whole fad in this, like, capitalist era. And so in the way that she writes and talks as well, she's like full maximalist. She's like, I'm going to try my best to express the full extent of what I mean here to whatever depth I please. And so it's just such a genuine, like, joy to read and get lost in. One of my favorites, my favorite essay in this is called Everywhere You Go, You Could Leave. So if you're a bit of a mindfulness nuthead, which I have been in the past, there's a famous guru called Ram Dass, and one of his famous quotes is, everywhere you go, there you are. So it's kind of like you have to be present with yourself and accept where you are in the situation and kind of have that, like, mental stoicism about it. But she kind of argues, like, that's stupid because we need political change. Like, we need a lot of real things and real changes to happen, not just like this internal sense of peace. So she says, well, everywhere you could go, you could leave. I love that attitude. It's a great essay collection because, she is clearly so opinionated about many things, such that, like, some things I don't agree with or I think are maybe incomplete, but even then, like, it's just so much fun to engage with it and really think about it. So, yeah, I really recommend it.
Yeah, I love what you said, a maximalist writing style.
Yeah, because the way I kind of think about it, like, you can see maximalism as, like, excessive or indulgent, but the way I see it is, like, dense. It's, like, rich and layered. You can keep looking at it and keep discussing it, and there's always more stuff that comes up.
Yeah, and it almost, like, attempts to match the complexities of the world, right? Because the world is not simple.
Yeah, it's ambitious in that sense.
Yeah,
so it really goes against the grain of, like, let's pare things back, like, simplify, quality over quantity, only one thing at a time. I really like it. It's daring. I saw she was described in a bunch of articles as iconoclastic. I think that's quite accurate.
So did she get her start on Substack?
I don't think so, because she writes for, like, the Washington Post and stuff like that, but she also happens to write on Substack, and a few others on Substack have been talking about her.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
I will link Marlene's Substack in the episode description, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much for the reading update. All right. So, Eezu, please introduce yourself.
Hey, my name's Eezu, and I'm very happy to be on this podcast. I feel like I'm not really much of a reader because I consume a lot of play. So I read scripts and I like to watch live theatre. So I love experiencing something that is quite ephemeral, that is only takes place live, and I feel like it's a very different way of consuming like media and entertainment.
It's different, but it's a very important form of literature.
Totally.
We love all forms of literature on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what have you been reading or watching recently?
So I want to talk about this play that was at Belvoir Theatre in Surrey Hills, and it's called Never Closer, written by Grace Chapple. And I actually watched with Marlene. So the context is that it's set in Northern Ireland during the Troubles in the 1980s, and it centers on this friend group whereby the main protagonist, she's this like girl, I think the opening scene is like when they're all like 17 and kind of like leaving school. And one by one, the friend group kind of falls apart because they keep leaving the country. And the main protagonist, Deirdre, she takes it really personally. Like for example, her best friend moves to England and she kind of like sees that as a betrayal. Not only just because it's set during the Troubles where there's that conflict between the countries, but also because she's losing a friend. And I think what the play does really well is that they show these interpersonal conflicts, but it can feel quite political. So I'm going to have some spoilers here, but basically one of the characters, he becomes radicalized, and he gets quite violent, like within the friend group. And when the girl who moved to England comes back, she has an English fiance, and he doesn't like that. And so things get quite heated, and it's almost as if he's blaming this Englishman for, like, you know, causing this colonization. And it's really hard because this man, his dad was shot by, a
British soldier.
Exactly. So I thought it's quite like a heartbreaking play to watch, but there was also a lot of comedic, funny moments. And like I think it's also quite a beautiful celebration of like friendship and having those kinds of relationships that support you and nurture you and teach you so much as a person, but also having to reckon with your own life changes and like friends moving overseas and things like that. Marlene right here in this room, she's one of my best friends. She's moving to Singapore next month. It's heartbreaking. Yeah, I was like, okay, basically the best friend who moved to England, she comes back 10 years later for Christmas in this like reunion, and the main character is really salty. Like she's like, you literally have not contacted us for the past 10 years. Like why did you just randomly rock up to my house bringing your English fiance? Like how dare you? And it's just so sad. And after the play, I turned to Marlene like, that better not be you, bitch. Like you better not just disappear to Singapore for the next 10 years and not talk to us. I don't think she will, but
Yeah, I love that it's like a group of people from different positions on the political spectrum being forced together in one room and being forced to interact.
Mm-hmm.
I love that kind of setup. It really like helps the audience navigate like the political atmosphere of the time.
Totally.
It reminds me of Derry Girls.
Oh yeah.
The TV show Derry Girls. I talked about this with Derek in one of our previous episodes, and funnily enough, one character in that show is called Deirdre. So it must have been a pretty common name in Ireland at the time. Mm-hmm. This is in Northern Ireland, right?
Yes, Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I really love this play too. I really bawled my eyes out during it. But I do love stuff that explores the relationship between the personal and the political, and especially with like a friend group, because it felt like very relatable. Like there were people our age going through a similar life stage, wanting to explore and get out in the world, except they were against this really intense like historical context. And I felt like there was a bit of a parallel in some sense, because I was hanging out with one of my best friends, and she's Palestinian, and obviously with all the horrible things going on, like I think we'd found it really hard to be able to like talk to each other about it or raise it. And actually the other day when we were hanging out, I kind of like awkwardly like started talking about the play as a way to like warm up to that kind of conversation, to like explain the way that I was feeling about it, about not being able to talk to it or not really knowing how to handle it, and also a lot of the conflict kind of within my life and other people about how they feel about it. And honestly, it was like one of the most rewarding conversations we ever had. Like we ended up just like standing at the bus stop where I was meant to leave for like an extra 2 hours, just like talking the whole thing out. I got to learn a lot from her, and I felt like it was a really like heart-connecting conversation. And I was really grateful that that play was kind of like an in for me to try and explain.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the key roles of art in our life, right? It is a way to talk about difficult things.
Yeah. I think what's so amazing about that play as well is it really just captures so raw this whole sense of like human futility and tragedy in war and the powerlessness of it as well. And I think when you can kind of approach a conversation from that point, like, I'm so fucking lost as to what to do about this insane thing happening so far away from me that just feels like such an assault, a direct assault on my sense of humanity. I don't know, it helps to start the conversation from there, because when you're talking human to human, it's not like cultural barriers, language, political barriers, all those things. So anyway, sorry to derail. I just thought it was
thanks for the contribution. It was brilliant.
I mean, Maya watched it as well, if you want to add anything, Maya. Only if you want to. You know.
Cool. Anything else you've been reading or watching?
I watched this other really cool play at Belvoir, and it's called POV. And it's live documentary theatre. So there's a child actor on stage, and she has a camera in her hand, and there's screens around the theatre. And so you can really see what the kid sees. And there's these two adult actors, and they're meant to be her parents, and they're arguing. So when she swivels her camera from like face to face as they're arguing, it's so sad for us to see like a child witnessing her parents, like, you know, go through these like difficulties. There's so many cool like different forms you can play with theater, like especially now with like technology and like multimedia and stuff. And you know, people have different opinions on it. They're like, oh, you know, you should keep theater just a theater, like you shouldn't, if I want to watch cameras, I want to watch a bloody film, you know. But I like love it when they really integrate it to the plot, and they make it like quite it's like the live cameras are integral to advancing the plot, because this kid is basically like capturing her the way, well, it's meant to be a statement about how we as adults communicate to kids about mental health. And basically her mum has bipolar, and so the dad tries to tell the kid like, oh, your mum's just like, you know, a bit low energy today, your mum's just feeling a bit sad today, and never really tell her what the issue is. Another really interesting element that they did was the two adult actors, they change every night. So they are given scripts, and they pretty much have to improvise. So they have to read out the scripts, or some scenes that child actor just asks them questions, and they just have to answer in the character of those parents. And the purpose of that is to put the child actor to give them the control and the power of those scenes, instead of typical narratives whereby the parent has more of a power over the kid. You know, with theater, we have these scripts, and people often think like, oh, you play the same script again, it's going to be the same thing. But that's not always the case. Like in this scenario, they literally change up the adult actors every single night. And so everyone gets to watch a slightly different show. And even if you do use rehearsed actors every single performance, like I feel like there are slight changes in terms of like the energy in the room, the way that the audience reacts. And I love that kind of interaction that happens that you just don't get from watching like film or TV, where it's quite like more of a static experience.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your reading update. Would you like to go next? Right. All right.
Hello.
Yeah. Alrighty, next up we have Maja. Welcome to the show, Maja.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I am Maja. I'm here on the writing retreat with this beautiful group of people. I typically consume, I would say poetry is the medium that I read the most, or sort of essays. I think when I was a kid, I used to devour novels and books. But I think, unfortunately, with life and sort of scheduling, I guess, and other things going on, I find that I sort of have lost the virtue of really like digging deep into a novel and like chewing it up, which is why I think in a way a poem or even like a short essay or like Substack blogs as well, I find is like probably where I feel most nourished and enriched, or like the easiest to access, I guess, because it's something you can just fit into your day. You can read it on the train or like at night.
Yeah, read whatever you can.
Because I would say like I'm the kind of reader, like I'm currently reading like 3 books concurrently that are like halfway. Like one of them I've been reading for like 4 months, and I'm like every now and then but I've like forgotten about it, and then I'll like pick it up again. But I still enjoy like reading the parts that I do when I do. I just don't like. It's hard for me to finish novels at this point in my life, I would say. Yeah, I also love buying books. I think the art of buying books is completely separate to the art of reading. I would think. But it's also just so fun going into the bookstore, and I feel like every time I go into a bookstore, I'm at a different point in my life, and each book that I choose is like a reflection of a specific desire inside of me or a specific interest or part of my personality that I want to express. So even if I don't read it, I feel like I'm kind of asserting that part of myself when I buy that book and like a certain version. And then even, looking back at your bookshelf, you kind of see like a patchwork of like all these different eras of your life, I guess, or like certain experiences or like, different moments in time. The era? Well, I bought an introduction to Sartre. I'm probably saying that. Yeah, Sartre. Yeah, the French philosopher. Jean-Paul Sartre, which I'm currently reading as well. It's like an illustrated version as well, which is great for my little, it's great. Yeah. Exactly. So I have really been enjoying that because something I find like in the hustle and bustle of work or, it's hard I want to make sure I'm still like picking up new ideas since leaving university and still getting exposed to like new concepts.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
so good.
these books are a great way to do that. I've been reading for like the last 6 months, The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. No, he's really great. Yeah, I finished his short stories, Laughable Loves, which was really enjoyable. Again, I love short stories because bang, 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 I just get that short-term satisfaction. So I'm enjoying it. I'm making my way slowly but surely. I'm probably like 3/4 of the way. So maybe one day I'll finish it. Yeah, we'll see. Yay. Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Some people on the retreat are very tired at the moment. It's 8:27, so it's their bedtime. We shall continue the recording tomorrow. So we're back from recess. This is the next morning. And who do we have here?
Derek. Also, totally not a recess. If you went to sleep and you woke up again, not a recess.
Yeah, but to the listener, it's a recess. It'll be like a 3-second break.
Yeah, okay. Well, to the 3 listeners we do have.
We have more than 3 listeners.
We are at an Airbnb and we're talking about writing, I guess.
Yes, we're still on the writer's retreat.
Yes.
Marlene very kindly organized.
Yep.
You arrived late last night, Derek.
Yeah, I came at like 11:30 or something. I may as well not have shown up, to be honest, but
we're glad you did.
Yes, because I got to sleep on a futon for the first time. It was surprisingly like comfortable, and him didn't kick me, so it's all good.
All right, so what have you been reading?
I started On the Road. Oh, okay, I just started it, so I'm not like very far into it. I've also ripped, I think, the middle 2 pages of it. It's fucking torn. I chucked it in my bag and then like
it's book violence.
Yeah, I don't treat my books very well. It's like actually ripped as well. Like I didn't realize how bad. I think I can still read the pages, so it's fine. But honestly, I'm about 10 pages in. I've only just started.
But I think 10 pages would have been enough to give you a taste of the writing style.
Oh yeah, the writing style is just like stream of consciousness. Like it's just some guy's thoughts, and like there's so much admission of like, what do you call it? Like narrative fallibility, like
omission of narrative.
No, like admission. Like he openly states he's like, I liked him and I was using him and he was using me and we like.
It's self-aware in that way.
It's fucking depressing already, to be honest.
I remember the beginning of the book and I actually like the beginning a lot. It's basically a young writer who just divorced his wife and who's out looking for new life experience.
Yeah, and he's just like latched on to, he's like, oh, this guy's full of life. Let me, like a parasite, let me hang on. And what are those called? Those like fish that like stick to other fish, like to sharks and stuff? Remoras or something? They're like these fish that they stick to the side of like a shark and they just go for the ride. That's basically what he did. And this guy who's like, the description of this guy is someone who who like uses all these big words and says sentences that don't mean anything. It's really good.
I don't know where he got all those big words from, to be honest.
He reads a lot because all he does is read and have sex. That's like the whole thing.
So has he begun his road trip yet?
Yeah, and then so I read up to the bit, maybe it's more than page 10. It's a bit where he like describes going up to, like, he had this fantasy of going from like all the way from the east to the west, but he can't do it because he tried to go up through like Chicago or something, and he gets stuck, and he's like really angry at himself for having not planned a fucking thing. And I was like, oh man, there's like, I would do exactly that. Because it makes it's like, oh, like it makes you feel like, oh, writers don't know fuck all. They're so fucking stupid. That's how I feel about, like, I hate writers more the more I read this book. No, that is the writer's identity. It's like the life of a parasite, like feeding off other people who are actually living their lives.
That hits very hard, Derek.
I think that's accurate.
I do not want to be attacked like this in the morning.
That's why I'm friends with Marlene. Talking about writers being parasites that attach themselves to people who live like colorful lives.
I'm not prepared for this kind of discussion in the morning. Explain what Marlene is doing.
She took a Polaroid of, she's just laughing at it for some reason.
Take a photo of Derek.
Yeah.
That when she takes the photo, I'm not going to be in it because I haven't been here this whole time.
Derek's really leaning into this fantasy where he believes himself to be a fictional character, and that everyone around him is just going to wake up one day and realize he's never been here.
I was actually going to write, I actually wanted to write an anthology about that. Like, so I was going to do one, I wanted to do one with like Jeremy and me would be the first one. But then you don't find out that I don't exist and then until the very last story.
What does existence mean? If Jeremy has had these prolonged conversations and relationship with you, then you might as well exist. It doesn't matter.
And he might as well go to psychiatric ward. Like, he probably needs like antipsychotics.
Are you finished with your reading update? I think we should give Abby the mic.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Give it to someone else.
All right. Thank you very much for your contribution, Derek. We love having you on this podcast.
Silence because I was never here.
Who do we have next?
Abby.
Yay!
Hey.
Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners of LP, Abby?
Yeah, of course. My name's Abby. I think my main form of creativity is mainly through photography. And yeah, aside from photography, I really like reading a lot. So I guess that's also why I'm on this writing retreat with everyone else.
How do you find the retreat so far?
Oh, it's been really great. Marlene was doing some, she really facilitated the session well in the beginning because I think everyone was a little bit nervous starting to write, but then she facilitated well. We did a couple of writing practices and then I think I really got into the groove at like from 9 p.m. to like 12 a.m. when it was a bit quieter and it was like a bit more moody. That's when I did most of my writing, yeah.
That's great. That was when I was already asleep.
Yeah.
What have you been reading, Abby?
So I recently finished Babel by RF Kuang. The listeners might know her other famous book, Yellowface.
Yeah, we have discussed it on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I need to listen to that episode then. But I finished Yellowface like mid 2022 or like end of 2022. And then my friend picked up Babel and he was like, I think you would really like the concept of this book. And I totally agreed with him and I will explain this concept now. So basically it's set in like 1830s in Oxford and it explores colonialism and racism through the literal power of language.
Oh, translations, right?
Yeah, through translations. And I was like, this is so cool because I love linguistics. I love languages. I love like meaning. So I was like, this is cool. I love
meaning.
Yeah. so no, but like the
Okay, the room is like in case like loves me.
Yeah, so basically the premise is in this new world set in like the 1830s, the Industrial Revolution is accelerated by the use of silver and the fact that it has magical properties. Yeah, it's fantasy history, but like a lot of the history is literally just like 1830s history, but it's like sped up a little bit because of silver and the magical properties that it holds. But basically, on the end of silver bars, they figured out that if you put one word on one side of the bar and another word that has a similar meaning in a different language, then whatever is lost in translation, because you can never have perfect translations, is captured in the silver bar. So when you speak the two words on either ends of the bar, then it has the meaning that's lost in translation. Yeah, so like I really like this book because it reminds me of like Harry Potter, but it's also like Harry Potter with like extra linguistics, and it's just really cool to like read initially. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Accio in Harry Potter. Like it's kind of the same thing. You learn a lot of the same like you learn similar words. For example, like one of the silver bar treatments that you're introduced to in the beginning is treacle in English, which is like a dessert, and then triacle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's Old French, which means I think antidote, or it means antidote. So what happens is this silver bar, when you say those two words, ends up being antidote to poison. So you can use that to heal people. So that's like an example of how this world works with these silver bars. So that's why I started reading into it. And it's really cool because the premise is they need people who are like actual speakers of the language, not people who are like so native speakers. So they take like orphans basically from like from all these parts of the world that are not London, and they train them to be translators. So it's like you have this, the main character is this half Chinese, half white boy who is taken from his dead mother. Like that's how the scene begins. Who's taken from his dead mother in Canton, which is basically like old
Guangzhou.
Yeah, Guangzhou. Old Guangzhou. And then he's taken to London and he's trained to be like a translator. So that's the world he knows. But he's obviously like Asian presenting. So he comes into the world and is never like, he never belongs, but they need him so much because he can speak this language that holds so much power for like the imperialist colony. So yeah, like this entire book just hinges off of his journey through 1830s white London, and it's really cool initially.
Initially,
yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that it's similar to Yellowface. Like how so? The genre is so different, right? Because Yellowface is contemporary literary fiction.
Yeah.
And Babel is like historical fantasy.
Yeah, I think it's just the writing style. I was like, RF Kuang is a very intelligent writer, and she's very like terse in her prose too, but she also has really nice moments where you're like, oh, that was very beautifully written. But I think what happened to me when I read Yellowface was I really liked it initially because the premise is really cool, but then her execution always like lets me down because she doesn't do too much in terms of like the character psychology. Everything seems very like stereotypical and like cartoonish, and she's also very didactic in the lessons she wants the reader to learn.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean a little bit. Like the problem with Yellowface was that I think she tried to talk about too many topics, but she didn't really go deep into any one of them.
Yeah, basically. So like this book was essentially like racism and colonialism 101. Yeah, and it's like presented through the dialogue of the characters, not through like, so she's very much like telling, not showing, through like each character. Like one character really believes in colonialism. They're like, oh yeah, we're giving all these people better lives. It's like free trade. What's wrong with this? And then another character is like, no, like I'm an Asian boy. You kind of get what I'm talking about, right? Like the characters aren't well developed. Please cut that part out. Please cut that.
Yeah, that's funny. I think that type of discussion might be enough for Twitter.
Yeah, and I think for historical fantasy fiction, it's just like, it's not what the reader's looking for as well. Like they want to be immersed in a new world, whereas I feel like she takes you back into this current world through her writing. I really like the first 200 pages, and I think the plot is just like a mess. I'm like, what is happening?
That was a brilliant review. Thank you so much, Abby.
Okay, no worries. Yeah.
Anything else you've been reading?
I also finished A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Oh, okay, the thing is,
it's a huge book.
It's like it's either like 600 or 700 pages, and I put it down when I had 100 pages left because it just got too traumatic,
too depressing. Okay,
yeah, too depressing. That was something I was reading before Babel, and I'm currently reading Butter by this Japanese author, but I think it's popping off on like Book Talk now, and that's been okay. But
thank you so much for your reading update, Abby.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is very fun.
Yay! That is it for this episode of Licensed Poetics. It was really wonderful to record some of the conversations that I had with my friends, and I hope you enjoyed listening along. Again, I apologize for the audio quality, and I'll do better next time when I do a out-of-studio recording. This is the podcast Licensed Poetics. I'm your host, Fangling. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!